What is up, everybody? My name is Blob, and welcome back to another episode of Pause. Thank you for joining me, and thank you to everyone for their kind comments and responses on the last video for the tour. But today we are going to be jumping into this episode with the one and only Jaguar. That is right, and I say one and only because at the time of recording this, it's the only cat that is represented in South America. Obviously, with DLC potentially approaching, this could all change given the speculation around what the new DLC could be. So this may change very, very soon. But as it stands, yeah, the only South American cat in the game. But more talk about the DLC a little bit later on, and a question that I am dying to ask all of you. And yeah, we'll get to that a little bit later on. But in the background here, I am starting this off with, I had a few things I really wanted to do for this habitat going into it. The first one was a viewing window where you could see the jaguars swim. They're quite strong swimmers. This is quite well known. The other cat that is going to probably have something very similar to this is going to be the Bengal tiger. But yeah, the jaguar is going to be the first one to exhibit strong swimming behavior. And this man-made pool was sort of one of those things I really wanted to get in here. So it's the thing I'm going to be working on first of all. And the second one that I really wanted to do in this is behind the meteorite, we had a little bit of a hill. And that hill is going to be where the jaguars can use a scratching post. But it's going to be sort of like an open bit, but there's going to be a dry mode so that the jaguars obviously can't get across to the guests. But it just offers another sort of unique viewing position. And then we're going to have our usual windowed area as well that isn't going to be looking into the watered area. But this watered area is heavily inspired by a video that I saw quite a while ago now. Can't remember the name of the video specifically or the person who made the video, but the premise of the video was it was this guy who had gone to South America and he was sort of doing a tour there, and his favorite animal was the jaguar. And while he was over in South America, he took a boat tour. And while on the boat tour, there was a moment, and they spent a good portion of the video sort of just watching this over. But they find a jaguar strolling up and down the riverbank. And this wide window really does help sell the idea that I was going for here, that I wanted it to be sort of emulating a riverbank without obviously putting a river inside the habitat because we don't have the space for it. But the makeshift pool is in, and then I go around and start doing an awful lot of terrain work. This is probably the most terrain work heavy habitat that I've made thus far, and that's saying something given obviously we know that the cougar was built on a literal hillside, but this one is just trying to get all the hills to join up in a natural looking way and still not have any sharp. I didn't want there to be any sharp hills where the jaguars could potentially look a bit awkward climbing up. I wanted it to all ebb and flow quite naturally and blend together quite nicely. And it did take me a little bit of time to get the desired look, but I think I really managed to get it in the end. Let us know what you think. But this habitat is going to be quite large. You can see here I've got like a sand terrain paint here on the ground, and that was originally where the path was going to go, but I soon came to the conclusion that the terrain area that I'd already worked on was pretty much going to be big enough for the jaguar. So completely retconned the original sand path and ended up redrawing it and redoing it all, as you can see me doing here in the background. The stone that I'm using is to sort of just tell me where I want the window to go as well. But it gives this side a little bit more room to work with. And then this bit where I'm flattening out in the middle is where the staff area is going to be for this habitat as well. Now by the end of the video, the whole habitat is going to be done, but the surrounding areas are not going to be decorated. I put an awful lot of effort and decoration into the water viewing side of things because that area is pretty much definitely going to be staying how it is, and it is set in concrete. But obviously the window viewing side, that it hasn't got the water viewing, because I've had to do a little bit of adjusting in terms of the space and where the path was originally going to go. It has made me sort of rethink the layout that I'm going to have to be doing over there. So I don't want to go placing all these rocks, trees, bushes, and any potential guest buildings only to just have to delete them or move them. So that area is going to be not finished after this video, and the staff area as well. The initial building and the bit where the Jaguar is going to go into is going to be there, but again, I kind of want to double this building up with the animal that's going to be coming in the next episode as well, just so that they're adjacent to each other and they can potentially share like one building, just for the sake of saving a few pieces here and there to prevent lag as we get to this latter stage of the sanctuary. I'm kind of adopting the mindset of this whole building areas for videos and then doing the little decor bits in between episodes has kind of served me quite well up to this point. So, why reinvent the wheel? Why, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's worked for me, so I'm going to be sticking with it. And here you can see me working on that hillside, trying to get that scratching post, but then reining in the terrain, because obviously I don't want it to be the terrain to be blocking where the Jaguars are going to be using the scratching post as well. I've already tested it, and the Jaguars actually do go up to that whole do actually go up to the scratching post, so it's not been a wasted effort. They do actually utilize that viewing opportunity for guests. Here I'm just doing a little bit of the exterior in terms of the walls. Again, I need to go back and obviously reevaluate the lion habitat, but I'm trying to sort of not use these retaining walls too much. I'm using them in areas that are a little bit higher where the rocks would maybe look not too great. So I'm obviously using rocks at the lower level, but the retaining walls obviously climb up above that rock work there as well. But yeah, trying to hit a nice balance between rock work, mesh, and also the retaining walls. And I think I do strike a pretty nice balance in this habitat. Just going through doing like the little detailing with the rocks on the edge here. But very shortly, you're going to be seeing me do something that you've seen me do pretty much for most of the speed builds thus far. And that is going to be just spam placing buffalo grass. They're actually quite tolerant of buffalo grass, which is kind of a surprise. And we do have some creosote bushes in here as well. This non-water viewing window is actually kind of probably what you're more familiar with in terms of my foliage style and whatnot, but the water viewing side definitely is a bit of a mix up. It's going to have some different trees that are going to be more airing on the tropical side of things, just to try and get that look that I was talking about earlier, replicating that video. But I'm just basically going through here and sort of filling out these patches with buffalo grass. Obviously the gaps in between are where the Jaguars would be walking through the habitat. It's not how it works in real life. You can't dictate the walking areas of these animals. They will just walk wherever they want to, but it still helps just sell that little bit of realism. If it's just a completely green field full of buffalo grass, then obviously it doesn't quite have the same look as you would want it to. And then in those gaps, I'm just lowering the buffalo grass down so that it blends in with the terrain a little bit more before I then move on to using some other types of foliage. Speaking of foliage, I think I'm going to be doing a video next week, potentially around how I do my foliage. I'm not going to call it a tutorial, because in my eyes a tutorial is sort of leans toward the idea of this is how you should do something. If you want a tutorial on, say, how to do long division, that video is going to show you how to do long division correctly, but that is obviously not going to be the purpose of the video when I do it. It's going to be more so on the tip side of things, how I do my foliage, and it's going to be more leaning toward the methodology side of things as opposed to plants that I will use on a regular basis. There is going to be a little bit of element of that, but I've come to the decision that I'm going to do this tips and tricks video, and it is going to be more tailored toward getting the console players started as well as they join us. Obviously not every DLC is going to be available from the get-go for them, so there are going to be disclaimers when I do that video as well. I'm not sure whether the updates are all going to be coming as one as well. I assume they are also going to be staggered, given that obviously some of the DLC animals would be things for like the walkthrough exhibits, but there's no point in them putting the walkthrough exhibit in the base game if there's no animals that can utilize it from the DLC, like the flying foxes and stuff like that. So a little bit interested to see how they work that sort of thing. Obviously there's some quality of life updates as well that we've seen over the course of the game. Things like the first person camera, is that going to be a thing? I assume so. but at the same time, I also don't know. So it'll be interesting to see how that works when it drops. And speaking of dropping, I mentioned earlier on the possibility of a DLC. It is coming up to that time again where we are going to be getting our DLC and potentially our last DLC for Planet Zoo. I say potentially because you can never say never to these things, and I obviously don't have any insider information to say for sure that this is going to be the last DLC, but it's going to be the last opportunity for the foreseeable future for us to have a new character in the Sanctuary. And when you look at the speculation surrounding it, a lot of people are saying it's going to be a DLC regarding the Americas. And instantly when I think of the Americas, I think of Ocelots, Jaguar and Canadian Lynx. Any three of those I would be absolutely stoked to get into the game at all. Canadian Lynx, you know my love of the Eurasia Lynx, so I'd love to see those join us. But at the same time, South America's representation of animals in the game, especially in terms of cats and big cats, is a little bit on the poor side. So I'd love to see some others join us as well. But in the event of us not potentially getting a new cat to the game, go over to the community tab right now on the channel and vote on the poll going on there. The poll quintessentially is me asking whether you would be okay or would you want to see me adding a modded animal at the end of the series. Now, why would you do that, I hear you ask? I'll be honest, obviously modding is something that is endorsed by Frontier, and it's not something that they encourage, but it is obviously a possibility in the game. But I really do think that part of the reason why this game has sort of been part of the success that it has been is down to people who have taken the time to do things like modding. Even if you aren't someone that uses mods yourself, I think just knowing that people are able to mod this stuff into the game fills you with the same level of hope that they could put the stuff into the game officially. Obviously there was mods ages ago for things like deer species, like the fallow deer and whatnot, and then you had the mods for things like platypus, etc. But they've all had their own official models since then. But I really feel like a lot of the desire to get those other animals in the game kind of comes from the mods as well, and I wanted to sort of take my time to appreciate those who have made the effort to make some of these mods as well. So just go over there and vote on it. Again, I'm going to be leaving that running for a while. It's going to be toward the end of the series, so it's not something that's going to be just crammed in the middle and you're going to be forced to watch it if you don't want to watch it. But things that you are currently watching is me doing this. I'm introducing some sand and some different terrain textures into the map now. All of the foliage work is kind of done. You see I've introduced those Dower plants, whatever they're called, the Dower palms. And then I start trying to make a viewing area with the glass, but I then sort of realized that I don't really like these thick beams, and then I'm just like, why am I doing this when I already have some nice viewing overhangs anyway? So I end up using one from the Lynx habitat, but what I end up doing is I end up sort of adjusting it so that it is suitable for this taller glass, and that means shuffling down the bottoms of these drains and adjusting you see the metal beams there that would have originally been at the base of the window. That obviously needs changing and taking out and adjusting as well as sort of stretching this roof along as well. But I'm really happy with how this looks once it's all decorated out on this side. And again, every now and then you'll see me just jumping into the first person camera. Again, really encourage you to do this. It helps you get an idea of the scale of what you're working with. It gives you an idea of whether things are looking how you want them to look. There's nothing worse than building something from this sort of upper explorer cam only to go into the first person cam for it to look absolutely awful. So I really do encourage you, again, use the first person camera. It's a lifesaver when it comes to making these things. But then I start doing some of Lion's signs very shortly and bringing those over. Again, these are absolutely incredible. Love them so much. And then I was like, this window's a little bit too wide, but I still want you to be able to see through it. So I just sort of fence off this last little bit with some of the guest barriers so that they don't go behind there and stand behind there. But you can, like I say, you can still see the whole width of the quote-unquote riverbank like I want you to be able to, but I don't know. This window feels a little bit too long, but at the same time, it doesn't, because once all the foliage is in and it starts to get that claustrophobic feeling, a similar sort of feeling that you get when you're at the Amur Leopard area. When that was first done, it felt really open, really spacious, and a little bit too open at times. But once the foliage worked its way in and you end up with this canopy over the top of your head, it made it feel a lot more enclosed. And in here, I noticed that there was like a weird little lip on the edge of the path where it was dipping down into the water. So just using concrete to help flatten that all off, and then merging it with the rest of the path using the vents here. These vents are really cool, by the way, for making drains on the ground, just for a little bit more detailing. Save having your paths as just one flat, uniform texture throughout the whole area. And of course, when you're working with things like water, you have probably seen this trick when it comes to decals and putting them on the glass to emulate sort of a not a mold, but a moss build up on the water line as well. And then just putting in all the usual safety features, things like the hot wire along the top of the viewing areas, around the edge of the rock work where it isn't covered by the mesh as well. But yeah, really happy with how this all looks. Again, this is meant to be an alcove off of the main path. This path that is here next to where I'm working is going to be the part that goes around to the staff area that's going to be used by the Jaguars and the animal that's going to be coming in the next episode. And then obviously the main path, the arterial path, if that's really what you want to call it, is the one that is going to keep wrapping around behind this as well, down to probably going to be the caracals as well. That they're not the ones that are going to be adjacent to the Jaguars, but just trying to get details in. This is really important for trying to keep your projects looking uniform with one another. You don't want it to feel like you're entering a whole different area of the world. Obviously, if you're going for theming, then you will have these changes, but I want it to feel like you're all in the same place without telling you. And I think the way of doing that is uniform foliage, uniform signs, using the same benches and bins and that sort of thing. All of these little tricks will help the whole thing blend together into one whole project that feels like it is just one living, breathing space. But yeah, just the lampposts here as well. I had a security camera as well. And then in a moment, we are going to be jumping over to the other window. And you'll see me not using the Lynx ones this time. Basically, what I've done is I have used the ones from the cheetah habitat this time, because I thought I'd recall those and bring those back, because I actually kind of like them. You know, like the cheetah habitat it's evolved. You know, it was the first habitat in the sanctuary, and I was a little bit on the fence about it, but after its rework, it has become probably one of my favorites. Although it's difficult to pick a favorite, it has to be said. I'm not going to pick favorites. No, I'm not going to do that. Bad blob. Now, it is worth noting that this rock work you see me placing here, this is all subject to change. The main bulk of it is going to be staying the same, but obviously I'm going to be adding some detailing in terms of using smaller rocks just to make it look a bit more natural rather than just a bunch of big boulders slapped together. We all know that look that I'm talking about. So when I come around to doing the detailing for this sort of area, obviously that will have a massive overhaul. And then I end up using this electric fence inside the Jaguar habitat as well, and then merging these wooden poles in there just to hide the main post but still keep that weird orange light, I think it is, at the top of the post as well. So I'm just trying to work the barriers around as I go, not instead of doing the barrier at the end. Just a little bit more detail. It's sort of to stop them from hiding at the back of the habitat as well. I know a lot of these plants aren't non-traversable, so I really want to try and mitigate the Jaguars hiding back here as best I can. And I think the best way of doing that is by adding this interior fence that they won't go beyond. I really want to keep them in the sight lines of the guests. But here I am starting to add in the shelter area for the Jaguars. Again, nothing too over the top, nothing too huge. It doesn't need to be at the end of the day. But this area will look a little bit larger anyway when I add the second building for the next animal as well. It will just pad out the whole little mini complex, as it were. But what I'm going to do now is leave you with the rest of the speed build. This is going to be me basically completing the exterior rock work and then adding in the window for the non-water area as well. You see me doing that here in the background. I'll leave you with the rest of the speed build. At the end, there's going to be a cinematic little video of the habitat as well. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Keep an eye out for the tips and tricks tutorial next week. Tutorial on foliage, as well as the next animal joining the sanctuary. And again, don't forget to check out the poll in the community tab. Thank you so much for watching. Peace out. I love you all. You're all amazing. Bye-bye. Bye.